The rain pounded against the windshield as Marcus Chen pulled his pickup truck into the gas station. After 3 tours overseas as a Navy SEAL medic, he thought he had seen everything. Now working as a paramedic in small-town Colorado, he believed his days of life-and-death situations were behind him. The digital clock on his dashboard read 11:47 p.m. as he stepped out into the cold mountain air. The gas station was nearly empty except for an old sedan parked near the convenience store. Marcus began filling his tank when he heard it, a soft whimper coming from the direction of the sedan. His military training kicked in immediately. Every sound, every movement around him became crystal clear. He had learned long ago that the quietest cries often came from those hurt the worst. Walking closer to investigate, Marcus noticed the driver's side door was slightly open. Inside, he could make out the silhouette of a woman slumped over the steering wheel. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Without hesitation, he approached the vehicle and gently knocked on the window. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he called out softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman slowly lifted her head. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see her face was bruised and swollen. Her left eye was nearly shut and dried blood stained her lip. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion that he recognized all too well from his time treating wounded soldiers. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just tired." Marcus had heard those words countless times before. Injured people always said they were fine, especially when they were anything but. His medical training told him she likely had a concussion, possibly broken ribs, and definitely needed immediate attention. But something else in her eyes told him there was more to this story. "My name is Marcus. I'm a paramedic," he said, keeping his voice calm and reassuring. "Can I take a look at those injuries?" "You don't look fine to me." The woman hesitated, glancing around nervously as if checking to see if anyone else was watching. "Really, I just need to get home. My husband is expecting me." The way she said husband made Marcus's stomach tighten. In his years of emergency medicine, he had seen this pattern before. The careful way she moved, the fear in her eyes, the obvious reluctance to seek help. It all pointed to domestic violence. But there was something else about her that he couldn't quite place. The way she held herself despite her injuries, a certain alertness that seemed familiar. "Look, I can see you're hurt pretty badly. At minimum, you should let me check for a concussion. Head injuries can be dangerous if left untreated," Marcus persisted gently. The woman studied his face for a long moment as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded slightly. Marcus opened the passenger door and slid into the seat beside her, being careful not to make any sudden movements. As he began his assessment, Marcus noticed several things that didn't add up. Her injuries were consistent with domestic violence, but her posture and the way she instinctively positioned herself suggested someone with combat training. When he reached toward her to check her pulse, she automatically shifted into a defensive stance before catching herself. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Marcus asked quietly. The woman's eyes widened slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "You positioned yourself for a counterattack when I reached for you. That's not something civilians typically do," Marcus observed. "I spent 8 years in the military. I recognize the training." For a moment, the woman's carefully constructed facade cracked. Marcus saw something flash in her eyes. Pain, recognition, and perhaps relief at being understood. But just as quickly, she rebuilt her walls. "You're imagining things," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus continued his examination, noting that despite her obvious injuries, her muscle tone and calluses on her hands suggested someone who maintained peak physical condition. There were faint tan lines around her wrist where a watch might sit, and a barely visible scar on her forearm that looked like it came from training rather than an accident. "What's your name?" he asked as he checked her pupils with a small flashlight. "Sarah," she replied after a pause. "Sarah Williams." Something about the way she said it made Marcus suspect it wasn't her real name. The pause was too long, too calculated. In his experience, people didn't hesitate when giving their real names unless they had a reason to hide them. The convenience store clerk had noticed them and was watching from inside. Marcus waved to indicate everything was okay, not wanting to draw more attention to the situation. Sarah noticed the gesture and seemed to relax slightly. "You said your husband is expecting you. Is he the one who did this?" Marcus asked directly. Sarah's body tensed immediately. "I fell down the stairs. It was an accident. Sarah, I've been treating trauma patients for over a decade. These injuries didn't come from falling downstairs. Someone hit you multiple times and with significant force." Marcus's voice remained gentle but firm. You don't have to protect whoever did this. The rain continued to beat against the car roof, creating a cocoon of privacy around them. Sarah stared out the windshield for several minutes before speaking again. Even if that were true, there's nothing anyone can do about it, she said finally. Some situations are more complicated than they appear. Marcus sensed there was much more to Sarah's story than a simple case of domestic violence. Her training, her careful word choices, the way she seemed to be protecting someone despite her obvious pain. It all suggested connections to something bigger, possibly classified. I want you to know that you have options, Marcus said. There are people who can help, places you can go where you'll be safe. Sarah turned to look at him then, and for the first time, he saw a hint of the strong person she really was beneath the injuries and fear. You don't understand, she said quietly. The kind of help I need doesn't exist in your world. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and immediately became more agitated. I have to go, she said, starting the car with shaking hands. Thank you for checking on me, but I really can't stay any longer. Marcus wanted to stop her, knowing she shouldn't be driving with a possible concussion, but something told him that pushing too hard right now would only make things worse. Instead, he pulled out his business card. Take this. If you need help, any kind of help, call me. Day or night, he said, pressing the card into her hand. Sarah looked down at the card, then back at Marcus. For just a moment, he thought she might break down and tell him everything. Instead, she carefully tucked the card into her jacket pocket. Thank you, Marcus. You're a good person, she said before slowly pulling away into the night. As Marcus watched her taillights disappear into the darkness, he knew this encounter was far from over. Something about Sarah Williams told him their paths would cross again, and next time, he intended to be better prepared to help her. 3 days passed before Marcus saw Sarah again. He had been thinking about her constantly, checking his phone, hoping she would call. Every domestic violence case he responded to as a paramedic reminded him of her injuries and the fear in her eyes. He had even called a few contacts from his military days, but without a real name or more information, there wasn't much they could do. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came in. A single vehicle accident on Highway 34, about 15 miles outside town. The caller reported a car had run off the road and crashed into a tree. No other vehicles involved. Marcus and his partner Jake responded immediately. When they arrived at the scene, Marcus felt his heart drop. The crumpled sedan wrapped around the pine tree was the same car he had seen Sarah driving 3 nights earlier. The front end was completely destroyed and spiderweb cracks covered the windshield. Steam rose from the crushed radiator. Looks like the driver overcorrected and lost control, Jake observed as they approached the wreckage. Could be a medical emergency that caused it. Marcus was already moving toward the driver's side, his medical bag in hand. Through the broken window, he could see Sarah unconscious, slumped forward against the deployed airbag. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead and her breathing was shallow. Sarah, can you hear me? Marcus called as he carefully opened the damaged door. She didn't respond. He immediately began checking her vital signs while Jake radioed for additional support and the helicopter medical team. As Marcus worked to stabilize her, he noticed something that made him pause. Despite the violent crash, Sarah's injuries seemed inconsistent with the damage to the vehicle. Yes, she had new cuts and bruises from the accident, but the older injuries he had seen 3 days ago appeared worse now, not better. Someone had hurt her again after their encounter at the gas station. More concerning was what he found when he checked her pockets for identification. Instead of a driver's license, he discovered a military ID card that had been snapped in half. The photo was definitely Sarah, but the name read, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy. The ID was recent, issued less than 6 months ago. Jake, I need you to see this, Marcus called his partner over. Showing him the broken ID card, Jake whistled low. Navy, huh? Wonder why she broke it, and why she told you her name was Williams. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused and disoriented, which was normal for someone who had just been in a serious accident. But when her gaze focused on Marcus, he saw immediate panic. The ID, she whispered urgently, trying to sit up despite her injuries. Did you find the ID? Easy, Sarah, don't try to move. You've been in an accident, Marcus said, gently restraining her. Yes, I found it. Lieutenant Mitchell, right? Sarah's face went pale, and not just from her injuries. You can't tell anyone, please, if they find out where I am." Her voice trailed off as she lost consciousness again. The helicopter arrived within minutes, and as they prepared to transport Sarah to the regional trauma center, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He slipped the broken military ID into his pocket instead of turning it over to the flight crew. Something told him Sarah had broken it for a reason, and until he understood what was happening, he needed to protect her secret. At the hospital, Marcus stayed close while Sarah was treated for her injuries. She had a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist from the crash. The doctor treating her was concerned about some of the older injuries that hadn't healed properly, particularly around her torso and face. These looked like they were inflicted over several weeks, Dr. Peterson told Marcus privately. "I'm required to report suspected abuse cases to the authorities." "I understand," Marcus replied. "But I think this situation might be more complicated than it appears. Can you give me some time to talk with her first?" Dr. Peterson studied Marcus's face. They had worked together on numerous cases over the years, and the doctor trusted his judgment. "I can hold off on the report for 24 hours, but no longer. If she's in danger, we need to involve law enforcement." When Sarah regained consciousness several hours later, she was alone with Marcus in her hospital room. Her eyes immediately darted around, checking exits and assessing threats, another sign of military training that civilian patients rarely displayed. "Where is it?" she asked immediately. Marcus pulled the broken ID from his pocket and placed it on the bedside table. "I kept it safe, but Sarah, or should I call you Lieutenant Mitchell, I need to understand what's happening here. You're obviously military, but you're hiding from something or someone. The injuries you had 3 days ago were worse when I found you today. Someone is hurting you systematically." Sarah stared at the ceiling for a long moment before speaking. "You shouldn't have kept that ID. If they trace it back to you, you could be in danger too." "Who is they?" Marcus pressed. "Sarah, I've been in combat. I've seen what fear looks like. And you're not just afraid of domestic violence. You're afraid of something much bigger." Sarah turned to look at him then, and Marcus saw a depth of pain and exhaustion that went far beyond physical injuries. "You really want to know? Fine, but once I tell you, there's no going back. You'll be involved whether you want to be or not." Marcus pulled his chair closer to the bed. "I'm already involved. The moment I decided to help you at that gas station, I made a choice." "So talk." Sarah took a shaky breath. 6 months ago, I was stationed at a classified facility outside San Diego. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. I was a medic assigned to a black ops unit that officially doesn't exist. We discovered something we weren't supposed to see. Evidence of weapons trafficking, money laundering, and worse. It went all the way to the top of the command structure. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly the kind of situation that could get people killed. "What did you do?" "I tried to report it through proper channels first. Big mistake. Within days, my entire team started having accidents. Training exercises went wrong, equipment malfunctioned, people started disappearing. I realized I was next, so I took copies of the evidence and ran. But the man who's been hurting you, is he military too?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Colonel David Stevens. My former commanding officer and the man I was supposed to marry next month. When I took the evidence and disappeared, they sent him to find me. He's been tracking me for months, getting closer each time. The cover story is that I had a breakdown and went AWOL. He's supposed to bring me back for medical evaluation and court-martial." Marcus processed this information, understanding now why Sarah had seemed so familiar. She wasn't just military. She was special operations, just like him. And the injuries? David has always had a temper, but when he found me last week, he was different. Angrier. He said the people he works for are getting impatient. They want the evidence back, and they want me to disappear permanently. The beating was supposed to convince me to tell him where I hid the files. But you didn't tell him. The evidence is the only thing keeping me alive right now. Once they have it back, I'm a liability that needs to be eliminated." Sarah struggled to sit up straighter. "Marcus, you need to stay away from me. David will be here soon. He always shows up after I have an accident to play the concerned fiancé. If he sees you helping me, then we need to get you out of here before he arrives," Marcus said, standing up. "I have contacts from my SEAL days. People who can help." Sarah grabbed his wrist with surprising strength for someone so injured. "You don't understand. This isn't just some rogue colonel. The corruption goes up to Pentagon level. There's nowhere to run that they can't reach. Marcus looked down at Sarah's hand on his wrist and made another decision that would change both their lives. Maybe not. But I know someone who might be able to help. Someone they definitely can't reach. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, they heard voices in the hallway. Marcus recognized the tone immediately. Military bearing, official business. Sarah's face went white as she recognized one of the voices. "He's here," she whispered. "David found me again." Marcus moved quickly to the window, checking the distance to the ground. They were on the second floor. Not ideal, but doable if necessary. "Sarah, do you trust me?" She looked at him with those haunted eyes that had first drawn his attention. "I don't have much choice, do I?" "No," Marcus said honestly. "But I promise you this, I won't let them hurt you anymore. And I won't let them silence what you know." The voices in the hallway were getting closer. Marcus could hear someone asking about Sarah's room number at the nurses' station. They had maybe 2 minutes before David Stevens walked through that door. And Marcus knew that once that happened, Sarah would disappear forever into the military system that was trying to kill her. It was time to make some calls to people he hadn't spoken to in years, people who owed him favors and operated outside normal channels, people who could help someone disappear for real, not just temporarily, but first they had to survive the next few minutes. The footsteps in the hallway grew louder and more distinct. Marcus could hear a man's voice speaking with authority to the nursing staff, explaining that he was here to see his injured fiancée. The tone was practiced, professional, and completely convincing to anyone who didn't know the truth. "Sarah, listen to me carefully," Marcus whispered urgently. "When he comes in here, you need to act like you barely remember me. I was just the paramedic who brought you in, nothing more." "Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, her face already transforming into a mask of confused vulnerability. Marcus was impressed by how quickly she could switch personas, another skill that came from special operations training. Marcus positioned himself near the medical equipment, making it look like he was simply checking her IV and monitors. He kept his posture casual and professional, just another medical worker doing his job. The door opened, and Colonel David Stevens walked in. Marcus immediately understood why Sarah was so afraid. Stevens was tall and imposing, with the kind of military bearing that commanded instant respect. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. But it was his eyes that told the real story, cold, calculating, and completely without warmth when he looked at Sarah. "Sweetheart," Stevens said, his voice dripping with false concern as he approached the bed. "I came as soon as I heard about the accident. Are you okay?" Marcus noted how Sarah instinctively shrank back slightly when Stevens reached for her hand. To an observer, it might look like normal discomfort from someone who was injured and medicated, but Marcus recognized it as the response of someone who had been hurt by those hands before. "I'm okay, David," Sarah said weakly, "just tired and confused. The doctors say I have a concussion." Stevens turned his attention to Marcus then, sizing him up with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating potential threats. "And you are?" "Marcus Chen, paramedic with the county EMS. I was part of the crew that responded to the accident," Marcus replied, keeping his voice neutral and professional. "I see. And what's your assessment of her condition?" Stevens asked, playing the role of concerned fiancé perfectly. "She's stable now, but she took a pretty hard hit. The concussion is moderate and she has some broken ribs and a fractured wrist. She'll need several weeks of recovery time," Marcus answered, sticking to the medical facts. Stevens nodded thoughtfully. "Sarah has always been a bit reckless when she's upset. She's been under a lot of stress lately with her medical leave from the Navy. Sometimes she doesn't make the best decisions when she's emotional." Marcus felt his jaw tighten at the subtle way Stevens was painting Sarah as unstable and irrational. It was a perfect setup for discrediting anything she might say about what had really happened to her. "The important thing now is that she gets proper care and rest," Marcus said carefully. "Of course, I'll be taking her home as soon as the doctors clear her for discharge. She needs familiar surroundings and people who understand her condition," Stevens replied, his hand moving to rest possessively on Sarah's shoulder. Marcus saw Sarah flinch slightly at the touch, and he had to force himself to remain calm. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to get between Stevens and Sarah, but he knew that would only make things worse for her. "Actually," a new voice said from the doorway, "I don't think Ms. Mitchell will be going anywhere for at least a week." Dr. Peterson entered the room, carrying Sarah's chart and looking very serious. The head injury is more severe than we initially thought. We need to keep her for observation and additional testing. Marcus saw the flash of anger that crossed Stephen's face before he composed himself. Doctor, with respect, I think you might be being overly cautious. Sarah is young and strong. I'm sure she can recover just as well at home with proper care. I'm afraid that's not possible, Colonel Stevens, Dr. Peterson said firmly. As the attending physician, I have the final say in when patients are discharged. Ms. Mitchell needs to remain under medical supervision. Marcus realized that Dr. Peterson was buying them time, probably sensing that something wasn't right about the situation. The doctor was a good man and an excellent physician, who always put his patients' welfare first. Stephen's smile became more forced. I understand your concern, Doctor, but I should mention that Sarah's case falls under military jurisdiction. I have authorization to transfer her to the Naval Medical Facility at Peterson Air Force Base, where she can receive specialized care for her condition. Marcus felt his heart sink. If Stevens managed to get Sarah transferred to a military facility, she would disappear completely into a system controlled by the same people who wanted her silenced. I'll need to see that authorization in writing, Dr. Peterson said. Until then, she remains my patient and my responsibility. Of course. I'll have the paperwork to you within the hour, Stevens replied smoothly. Marcus knew they were running out of time. Once Stevens returned with official transfer orders, there would be nothing anyone could do to stop him from taking Sarah. He needed to act fast. Colonel, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Marcus asked. I have some questions about Ms. Mitchell's medical history that might help with her treatment. Stevens looked suspicious but nodded. Of course. They stepped into the hallway, leaving Sarah with Dr. Peterson. Marcus led Stevens a bit further from the room before speaking. I've been a paramedic for several years, and I've seen a lot of accident victims, Marcus began carefully. Some of Ms. Mitchell's injuries seem inconsistent with the crash pattern. Stevens's eyes hardened slightly. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm just noting that she has some older injuries that appear to be healing. The accident couldn't have caused those. As medical professionals, we're required to report suspected abuse cases. Are you suggesting that I would hurt my fiancée? Stevens asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. Marcus held his ground. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what I observed and what my medical training tells me. If there's another explanation for those injuries, I'd like to hear it. Stevens stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. Let me be very clear, Mr. Chen. Sarah has been suffering from severe PTSD since her last deployment. She's been having episodes where she hurts herself or puts herself in dangerous situations. That's why she's on medical leave, and that's why she needs specialized psychiatric care. Marcus felt sick. Stevens was systematically destroying Sarah's credibility, making it impossible for anyone to believe her story about the corruption she had uncovered. I see, Marcus said, playing along while his mind raced. That would explain some things. I'm glad you understand. Sarah is very important to me, and I want what's best for her. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about her care, even when she doesn't understand why they're necessary. Marcus nodded, pretending to accept the explanation while memorizing every word. If Sarah was right about the extent of the corruption, they were going to need evidence of everything. Well, I should get back to my other calls, Marcus said. I hope she recovers quickly. Thank you for your concern and for taking such good care of her, Stevens said, his public persona sliding back into place. As Marcus walked away, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to an old SEAL teammate who now worked in private security. Need a favor. Big one. Life or death situation. Can you be in Colorado tonight? The response came back within minutes. On my way. Marcus returned to Sarah's room to find Stevens sitting beside her bed, holding her hand while she pretended to sleep. Dr. Peterson was updating her chart at the nurse's station. Doctor, could I have a word? Marcus asked quietly. They walked to a quiet corner of the ward. That man is going to hurt her, Marcus said bluntly. I can't prove it yet, but every instinct I have is telling me she's in danger. Dr. Peterson looked troubled. I had the same feeling. That's why I insisted on keeping her for observation. But if he comes back with military transfer orders, my hands will be tied. How long can you stall? Maybe 12 hours if I'm creative with the medical justifications. After that, they can override my authority. Marcus nodded grimly. 12 hours wasn't much time, but it might be enough if his backup arrived as promised. Doctor, if something happens to her after she leaves here, will you be able to live with that? Dr. Peterson met his eyes. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to trust me. I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you that if Sarah Mitchell goes with that man, she will never be seen again. The doctor was quiet for a long moment, weighing his professional obligations against his gut instincts. Finally, he nodded. I'll do what I can. But Marcus, if you're wrong about this, I'm not wrong, Marcus said with complete certainty. The only question is whether we can save her before it's too late. As they spoke, neither man noticed Colonel Stevens standing just around the corner. His phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in low, urgent tones to someone on the other end. Yes, sir. The situation is more complicated than we anticipated. There are civilians involved now who are asking questions. I need additional resources and authorization to clean this up completely. The voice on the other end was cold and authoritative. You have 12 hours to secure the package and eliminate any potential complications. No loose ends this time, Colonel. Too much is at stake. Stevens closed his phone and walked back toward Sarah's room, his mind already working on a new plan. If people were going to interfere with his mission, then they would have to be dealt with accordingly. After all, national security was at stake, and sometimes innocent people got caught in the crossfire. The clock on the wall showed 4:30 p.m. In 12 hours, one way or another, this situation would be resolved. At 9:15 p.m., Marcus received a text from his old teammate. In parking lot. Black SUV, come alone. Marcus looked around the hospital ward. Stevens had left an hour earlier, claiming he needed to handle the transfer paperwork, but Marcus suspected he was coordinating something much more sinister. Two men in suits had arrived shortly after Stevens left, positioning themselves in the waiting area with clear sightlines to Sarah's room. They looked like military or federal agents trying to blend in as concerned relatives. Marcus walked casually toward the elevator, taking note of where the watchers were positioned. As the doors closed, he saw one of them speaking quietly into a radio. They were definitely tracking his movements. In the parking lot, Marcus spotted the black SUV immediately. As he approached, the passenger window rolled down to reveal a familiar face, Tommy Rodriguez, a former SEAL sniper who had saved Marcus's life more than once during their deployments together. Get in, Tommy said simply. Marcus climbed into the passenger seat and immediately felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Tommy was one of the most competent operators he had ever worked with, and if anyone could help navigate this situation, it was him. So what kind of trouble have you gotten yourself into now? Tommy asked with a slight grin. Marcus quickly explained the situation, starting with his encounter with Sarah at the gas station and ending with Stevens' obvious plan to make her disappear. Tommy listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. This is bigger than you think, Tommy said when Marcus finished. I've been hearing whispers about some kind of cleanup operation involving a missing Navy intelligence officer. Word is she took some very sensitive material when she went AWOL. She's not AWOL, Marcus protested. She's trying to expose corruption in her own command structure. I believe you, but the official story is that Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell suffered a complete psychological breakdown and stole classified documents before disappearing. There's a standing order to bring her in for psychiatric evaluation and court-martial. Marcus felt sick. They've completely destroyed her credibility before she even has a chance to present her evidence. That's how these things work. Control the narrative and you control the outcome. Tommy pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus several official-looking documents. I did some digging on your Colonel Stevens. He's been involved in some very questionable operations over the past few years. Weapons deals, off-the-books missions, money that can't be accounted for. Can you prove any of it? Not legally. But I know people who know people. Stevens is dirty and he's working for people who are even dirtier. If they're willing to kill a Navy officer to cover this up, they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone else who gets in their way. Marcus nodded grimly. So what do we do? Tommy was quiet for a moment, considering their options. We need to get her out of that hospital tonight. Once Stevens comes back with official transfer orders, she's gone forever. But if we move her first, we might be able to get her somewhere safe long enough to figure out our next move. I was thinking the same thing. But those watchers inside will report any unusual activity. Leave that to me. I brought some equipment that should help with that problem. Tommy opened a case in the back seat, revealing what looked like sophisticated electronic devices. Signal jammers, communication interceptors, and a few other toys. We can blind them temporarily, but we'll need to move fast. Marcus checked his watch. Dr. Peterson said he could stall until about 4 a.m. After that, they can override his authority and take her whether he agrees or not. Then we have about 6 hours to get her clear and somewhere safe. I know a place, a safe house used by people who help soldiers in situations like this. It's off the grid, secure, and protected by people who don't ask questions. What about the evidence she says she has? If we move her without securing that first, they'll just keep hunting her. Tommy nodded approvingly. Good thinking. Where is it? Marcus realized he had never asked Sarah that crucial question. I don't know, but I can find out. They returned to the hospital using separate entrances. Marcus went through the main lobby while Tommy entered through the emergency department, posing as a visiting family member. The plan was for Tommy to position himself where he could neutralize the Watcher's communications when the time came. Marcus found Sarah awake in her room, staring at the ceiling with a look of resignation that broke his heart. She had clearly given up hope of escape. How are you feeling? He asked, pulling a chair close to her bed. Like a dead woman walking, she said quietly. David was here earlier. He told me the transfer is happening at 4 a.m. After that, she shrugged, unable to finish the thought. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. We're going to get you out of here tonight, but I need to know where you hid the evidence. Without it, they'll never stop hunting you. Sarah's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. Who's we? A friend of mine. Former military, someone I trust completely. He's helped other people in situations like this. Marcus, you don't understand what you're risking. These people have resources you can't imagine. They can make you disappear just as easily as they can make me disappear. I understand the risks, but I also understand that letting them win means more people will die. How many other soldiers have they silenced? How many more will they silence if someone doesn't stop them? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she made her decision. There's a storage unit in Denver. Unit 247 at Secure Store on Colfax Avenue. The key is taped under the dashboard of my car, which is probably impounded at the police lot by now. What's in the unit? Copies of financial records, communications between Stevens and his contacts, photographs of weapons shipments, and a detailed record of every illegal operation I witnessed or participated in. Everything needed to bring down the entire network. Marcus felt a surge of hope. If they could get that evidence to the right people, it might be enough to stop Stevens and his associates permanently. Is there anyone you trust in the military? Someone clean who could act on this information? Maybe. Admiral Rebecca Martinez at Naval Intelligence. She's old school by the book and she despises corruption. But getting the evidence to her without it being intercepted will be nearly impossible. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. Watcher's getting restless. Something's happening. Move soon. Sarah, we need to go now. Are you strong enough to walk? She struggled to sit up, wincing from her broken ribs. I'll have to be. Marcus helped her get dressed using clothes Tommy had thoughtfully provided. As they prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed his arm. Marcus, once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be fugitives just like me. Are you sure about this? Marcus thought about his quiet life as a small-town paramedic, the simple routine he had built for himself after leaving the military. Then he thought about Sarah's bruised face and the fear in her eyes, about the other soldiers who might be suffering or dying because of Stevens's corruption. I'm sure, he said firmly, some things are worth the risk. Sarah nodded, a spark of her old determination returning to her eyes. Then let's go expose these bastards. Marcus disconnected her IV and helped her into a wheelchair, covering her with a blanket to disguise her appearance. As they prepared to leave the room, his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Marcus Chen? The voice was cold and authoritative. Yes, this is Colonel Stevens. I think we need to have a conversation about your continued involvement in my fiancé's care. Meet me in the parking lot in 5 minutes. Come alone. Or things will become very unpleasant for everyone involved. The line went dead. Marcus looked at Sarah, who had gone pale despite her injuries. He knows, she whispered. David always knows. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text from Tommy. 3 black SUVs just pulled into the parking lot. This is about to get very messy. Through the window, Marcus could see vehicles surrounding the hospital. Stevens wasn't just planning to take Sarah quietly. He was preparing for a full operation. The colonel had clearly decided that subtle approaches were no longer sufficient. "Change of plans," Marcus said, moving toward the window. "We're not going out the front door." Sarah looked at the distance to the ground and managed a weak smile. "Just like old times. I always did prefer unconventional exits." Marcus opened the window and looked down. They were on the second floor, with a maintenance roof about 8 feet below. It was doable but risky given Sarah's injuries. His phone rang again. This time it was Tommy. "Marcus, they've got the place surrounded. Professional operation, military precision. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. Can you create a distraction? Already working on it. Give me 60 seconds, then move." Marcus helped Sarah to the window. Despite her broken ribs and fractured wrist, she positioned herself for the drop with the efficiency of someone who had done similar things many times before. "On my signal," Marcus said. In the distance, they heard the wail of multiple fire alarms going off simultaneously throughout the hospital. Emergency lights began flashing, and the public address system crackled to life with evacuation instructions. "Tommy's good," Sarah said with genuine admiration. "He's the best. Now let's go." Marcus went first, dropping to the maintenance roof and positioning himself to catch Sarah. She followed a moment later, landing hard but managing to stay on her feet despite obviously being in significant pain. They could hear shouting from the parking lot as Stevens's team realized their quarry was no longer in the room. The fire alarm had created chaos, with staff and patients beginning to evacuate the building. "This way," Marcus said, leading Sarah across the rooftop toward the back of the building. As they moved, Marcus's mind was already working on their next problem. Even if they escaped the immediate area, Stevens now knew that Marcus was actively helping Sarah. The colonel would use all of his resources to track them down, and those resources were considerable. They reached the edge of the roof where a fire escape led down to the alley behind the hospital. As they descended, Marcus could see Tommy's SUV waiting in the shadows, engine running. But as they reached the ground level, Marcus realized they had another problem. 3 men in tactical gear were moving through the alley, checking every doorway and shadow. Stevens had anticipated this escape route. "Stay here," Marcus whispered to Sarah, then picked up a piece of debris from the alley. He threw it toward the far end of the alley, creating a noise that drew the attention of the tactical team. As they moved to investigate, Marcus and Sarah slipped along the wall toward Tommy's vehicle. They were almost there when one of the men turned around and spotted them. "Contact!" Back alley, 2 subjects moving toward the vehicle. Marcus grabbed Sarah and ran the last 20 feet to the SUV, yanking open the door just as Tommy floored the accelerator. Gunshots rang out behind them as they sped away into the night. "Everyone okay?" Tommy called from the driver's seat. "We're alive," Marcus replied, checking Sarah for new injuries. "But they know we're working together now. This just became a war." Sarah leaned back against the seat, breathing heavily. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I never wanted to drag you into this. You didn't drag me into anything. I made a choice." Marcus looked out the rear window to see if they were being followed. "Now we need to get that evidence and find a way to end this before more people get hurt." Tommy glanced in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Denver," Marcus said. "We have a storage unit to visit." As they drove through the night, none of them noticed the small tracking device that had been placed on the SUV while they were escaping from the hospital. Colonel Stevens was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He had anticipated that his quarry might escape, and he had prepared accordingly. In his command vehicle, Stevens watched the blinking dot on his GPS screen as it moved steadily toward Denver. Finally, after months of cat and mouse games, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was going to lead him directly to the evidence that could destroy everything he had worked to build. "All units maintain distance and observe only," he spoke into his radio. "Let them think they've escaped. When they retrieve what we're looking for, then we'll make our move." The final confrontation was only hours away. The drive to Denver took 3 hours through winding mountain roads. Tommy kept checking his mirrors, but there was no sign of pursuit. Sarah dozed fitfully in the back seat, her body finally succumbing to exhaustion and pain medication. Marcus used the time to think through their next moves. Getting the evidence was only the first step. They needed to find a way to get it to someone who could act on it, without being intercepted or silenced. Admiral Martinez seemed like their best option, but reaching her would be nearly impossible through normal channels. "Tommy, do you still have contacts at SOCOM?" Marcus asked quietly, referring to Special Operations Command. "A few. Why?" "We need someone who can get a message to Admiral Rebecca Martinez at Naval Intelligence. Someone Stevens can't reach or intimidate." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "I might know someone. Master Chief Patricia Wilson. She's old school, been around forever, and she has no love for dirty officers. If anyone could get a secure message to the Admiral, it would be her." "Can you reach her?" "Maybe. But Marcus, even if we get the evidence to the right people, Stevens isn't going to just give up. He's too deep in this to walk away. If exposure means prison or worse for him and his associates, they'll do whatever it takes to stop us." Marcus nodded grimly. He had been thinking the same thing. "I know, but what's the alternative? Let them win? Let more soldiers die to protect their operation?" "No alternative," Tommy agreed. "I'm just saying we need to be prepared for them to escalate. Once we make our move, they'll come at us with everything they have." As they approached Denver, Sarah stirred in the back seat. "How much further?" she asked groggily. "About 20 minutes, Marcus replied. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but I'll manage." She sat up straighter, wincing from her broken ribs. "Marcus, there's something else you need to know about the evidence." "What?" "It's not just about Stevens and his immediate associates. The corruption goes much higher than that. There are Pentagon officials, defense contractors, even some members of Congress involved. When this comes out, it's going to create a massive scandal." Tommy whistled low. "That explains why they're so desperate to silence you. We're not just talking about court-martials here. We're talking about people going to federal prison for treason." "Exactly. And those people have resources that go far beyond what a single colonel can access. Once they realize the evidence is in play, they'll mobilize everything they have to recover it." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't just fighting Stevens anymore. They were going up against a network of powerful people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. "All the more reason to move fast," he said. "Get the evidence, get it to the right people, and make it public before they can stop us." They reached the storage facility at 2:30 a.m. The place was deserted except for a single security guard who was dozing in his booth. Tommy parked the SUV where it couldn't be seen from the main road, and they made their way to the gate. "The lock is electronic," Sarah said, looking at the keypad. "I need to get to my car to retrieve the key." "Where would they have impounded it?" Marcus asked. "Probably the county lot on Morrison Road. But getting there and back will take at least an hour, and that's assuming we can get to it without being spotted." Tommy pulled out a small device from his bag. "Electronic lockpick? Give me 30 seconds." Within moments, the gate clicked open. They made their way through the rows of storage units until they found number 247. Sarah produced a backup key she had hidden in her jacket. Inside the unit, boxes of documents were stacked neatly along the walls. Sarah went directly to a specific box and pulled out several thick folders. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and determination. "Everything they're trying to hide." Marcus looked through some of the documents and felt his anger building. There were records of weapons sales to unauthorized buyers, financial transfers to offshore accounts, and communications discussing the elimination of witnesses who had become inconvenient. "This is enough to bring down dozens of people," he said. "That's why they're so desperate to get it back," Sarah replied. She was photographing key documents with her phone, creating backup copies. "If this information reaches the wrong people, or the right people, depending on your perspective, it will destroy careers and send people to prison for the rest of their lives." Tommy was standing guard near the entrance when his phone buzzed with a text. He read it and his expression darkened. "We have a problem," he said. "My contact just sent me a message. There's been chatter on military channels about a priority recovery operation in the Denver area. They know we're here." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "How is that possible? We weren't followed." Tommy walked around their SUV with a small electronic device, scanning for signals. After a few moments, he stopped near the rear bumper. "Tracker," he said, showing them a small device. "Professional-grade military issue. They've been following us the whole time." Sarah closed her eyes in frustration. "They let us escape so we would lead them to the evidence." "Smart," Tommy admitted grudgingly. "Now they know exactly where we are and what we're doing." Marcus looked around the storage facility. It was surrounded by open ground with limited cover. If Stevens's people moved in now, they would be trapped with nowhere to run. How long do we have? He asked. Based on the tracker signal, I'd say they're probably already positioning teams around the perimeter, maybe 10 minutes before they move in. Sarah was frantically stuffing documents into a backpack. We need to get out of here now. Wait, Marcus said, an idea forming. What if we don't run? Tommy and Sarah looked at him like he had lost his mind. Hear me out. They're expecting us to panic and try to escape with the evidence. What if instead we make copies and send them to multiple people simultaneously? Create so many leaks that they can't possibly stop them all? Tommy's eyes lit up with understanding. Flood the zone. Send the information to journalists, Congress members, military investigators, anyone who might act on it. Exactly. And those people have resources that go far beyond what a single colonel can access. Once they realize the evidence is in play, they'll mobilize everything they have to recover it. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They weren't just fighting Stevens anymore. They were going up against a network of powerful people who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. All the more reason to move fast, he said. Get the evidence, get it to the right people, and make it public before they can stop us. They reached the storage facility at 2:30 a.m. The place was deserted except for a single security guard who was dozing in his booth. Tommy parked the SUV where it couldn't be seen from the main road, and they made their way to the gate. The lock is electronic, Sarah said, looking at the keypad. I need to get to my car to retrieve the key. Where would they have impounded it? Marcus asked. Probably the county lot on Morrison Road. But getting there and back will take at least an hour, and that's assuming we can get to it without being spotted. Tommy pulled out a small device from his bag. Electronic lockpick. Give me 30 seconds. Within moments, the gate clicked open. They made their way through the rows of storage units until they found number 247. Sarah produced a backup key she had hidden in her jacket. Inside the unit, boxes of documents were stacked neatly along the walls. Sarah went directly to a specific box and pulled out several thick folders. This is it, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and determination. Everything they're trying to hide. Marcus looked through some of the documents and felt his anger building. There were records of weapons sales to unauthorized buyers, financial transfers to offshore accounts, and communications discussing the elimination of witnesses who had become inconvenient. This is enough to bring down dozens of people, he said. That's why they're so desperate to get it back, Sarah replied. She was photographing key documents with her phone, creating backup copies. If this information reaches the wrong people, or the right people, depending on your perspective, it will destroy careers and send people to prison for the rest of their lives. Tommy was standing guard near the entrance when his phone buzzed with a text. He read it and his expression darkened. We have a problem, he said. My contact just sent me a message. There's been chatter on military channels about a priority recovery operation in the Denver area. They know we're here. Marcus felt his stomach drop.
How is that possible?
We weren't followed. Tommy walked around their SUV with a small electronic device scanning for signals. After a few moments, he stopped near the rear bumper. Tracker, he said, showing them a small device. Professional grade, military issue. They've been following us the whole time. Sarah closed her eyes in frustration. They let us escape so we would lead them to the evidence. Smart, Tommy admitted grudgingly. Now they know exactly where we are and what we're doing. Marcus looked around the storage facility. It was surrounded by open ground with limited cover. If Stevens' people moved in now, they would be trapped with nowhere to run. How long do we have? He asked. Based on the tracker signal, I'd say they're probably already positioning teams around the perimeter, maybe 10 minutes before they move in. Sarah was frantically stuffing documents into a backpack. We need to get out of here now. Wait, Marcus said, an idea forming. What if we don't run? Tommy and Sarah looked at him like he had lost his mind. Hear me out. They're expecting us to panic and try to escape with the evidence. What if instead we make copies and send them to multiple people simultaneously? Create so many leaks that they can't possibly stop them all? Tommy's eyes lit up with understanding. Flood the zone. Send the information to journalists, Congress members, military investigators, anyone who might act on it. Exactly. They can silence 3 people, but they can't silence dozens. Sarah was already pulling out her phone. I have secure email addresses for several investigative journalists who specialize in military affairs, and Admiral Martinez's personal contact information. Do it, Marcus said. Send everything to everyone. Make this information so widespread that trying to suppress it becomes impossible. As Sarah worked to transmit the documents, Tommy was preparing their exit strategy. There's a drainage tunnel that runs under this facility. It connects to the storm system downtown. If we can reach it, we might be able to get clear before they close the net. Marcus was helping Sarah organize the transmissions when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Stephen's number. Answer it, Sarah said. Buy us time. Marcus answered the call. Colonel Stevens. Mr. Chen, I have to admire your persistence, but this charade ends now. You are surrounded by a full tactical team and there is nowhere for you to run. What do you want, Stevens? I want Ms. Mitchell and the stolen documents she took from a classified facility. In return, I'm prepared to offer you and your friend safe passage out of this situation. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was still furiously typing on her phone. She held up one finger indicating she needed another minute. And if we refuse your generous offer, Marcus asked, then I'm afraid you'll be classified as enemy combatants who died while resisting arrest. Your families will be told you were involved in a terrorist plot that threatened national security. The coldness in Stevens's voice made it clear he wasn't bluffing. This man was prepared to kill anyone who stood in his way. I need a few minutes to discuss this with my associates, Marcus said. You have 5 minutes. After that, we're coming in. The line went dead. Sarah looked up from her phone with a grim smile. Done. I just sent everything to 12 different people, including Admiral Martinez, 3 investigative journalists, and several members of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Even if they kill us, the truth is already out there. Tommy had found the entrance to the drainage tunnel hidden behind some equipment. This way, we need to move now. As they prepared to descend into the tunnel, Marcus felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened next, they had accomplished their mission. The evidence was in the hands of people who could act on it, and Stevens's network would finally face justice. But first, they had to survive the next few hours. The sound of vehicles approaching echoed through the night air. Stevens' tactical team was moving into position, unaware that their primary objective, controlling the evidence, had already slipped through their fingers. The real battle was just beginning. The drainage tunnel was dark, cramped, and filled with the smell of stagnant water. Sarah struggled with her injuries, but she pushed forward without complaint. Behind them, they could hear the muffled sounds of Stevens' tactical team breaching the storage facility. They'll figure out we're gone pretty quickly, Tommy whispered as they crawled through the concrete passage. This tunnel connects to the main storm system about half a mile from here. If we can reach it, we'll have multiple exit points. Marcus helped Sarah navigate around a section where the tunnel narrowed. Despite everything she had been through, she maintained the quiet determination that had first caught his attention. Even injured and exhausted, she refused to give up. How long before your contacts receive the documents? Marcus asked quietly. The emails should have gone through immediately, but whether anyone acts on them depends on several factors, Sarah replied. Admiral Martinez is in Washington, 3 time zones ahead. The journalists might not check their secure email until morning. We could be on our own for several more hours. Above them, they heard the sound of vehicles moving and radios crackling. Stevens had deployed a significant force, probably assuming that overwhelming firepower would end this situation quickly. What he didn't know was that the evidence was already beyond his reach. After 20 minutes of crawling, they reached a larger junction where several tunnels met. Tommy used a small flashlight to check their options. This way leads downtown. We can surface near the federal building, which might give us some protection. Stevens won't want to operate openly in such a public area. As they changed direction, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She looked at the caller ID and her eyes widened. It's Admiral Martinez, she whispered. Answer it, Marcus said, but keep your voice down. Sarah answered the call carefully. Admiral, Lieutenant Mitchell, I just received some very disturbing information via email. Is this material authentic? Yes, ma'am. Every document, every photograph, every financial record. I've been gathering evidence for months. Where are you now? And what's your status? Sarah quickly explained their situation, describing Stevens' pursuit and the immediate danger they faced. Admiral Martinez listened without interruption. Lieutenant, I'm going to be direct with you. Based on what I've seen in these documents, there are people at very high levels who want you silenced permanently. I cannot guarantee your safety through normal military channels. Marcus felt his heart sink. If even Admiral Martinez couldn't protect them through official means, Their options were extremely limited. However, the Admiral continued, I have some resources that operate outside normal channels. People who specialize in protecting whistleblowers and ensuring that evidence like this reaches the right authorities. Can you get to a secure location and maintain communications for the next 6 hours? We're working on it, ma'am, Sarah replied. Good. I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, trust no one in uniform except the people already helping you. The corruption in these documents goes deeper than I imagined. The call ended, leaving them in the dark tunnel with slightly more hope than they'd had before. At least someone in authority was taking the evidence seriously. They continued through the storm system, emerging finally in a drainage outlet near downtown Denver. The area was deserted at this hour, with only occasional traffic passing on the nearby streets. Tommy checked his phone and frowned. I'm getting messages from my contacts. Word is spreading fast through certain circles that there's a major operation in progress. Stevens has called in favors from multiple agencies. What kind of favors? Marcus asked. The kind that involve federal resources and broad authorities. He's painting this as a national security threat, claiming that Sarah stole classified information and is planning to sell it to foreign agents. Sarah laughed bitterly. Of course he is. It's the perfect cover story. Who's going to question an operation to stop a traitor? Marcus realized they were facing an even bigger problem than he had thought. Stevens wasn't just using military resources. He was using the entire federal law enforcement apparatus to hunt them down. We need to get somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses and security cameras, Marcus said. Stevens can't operate openly if there are too many people watching. Tommy nodded toward the city center. The main library opens at 6 a.m. It has excellent security and is always full of people. If we can hold out until then, we might be able to wait for Admiral Martinez's help to arrive. They began walking toward downtown, staying in shadows and avoiding main streets. As they moved, Marcus noticed Sarah was struggling more with each step. Her injuries were taking their toll and she needed medical attention soon. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. I've been better, she admitted. But I've also been worse. During one mission in Syria, I spent 18 hours in a collapsed building with a broken leg and internal bleeding. This is manageable. Marcus was constantly amazed by her resilience. Despite everything Stevens had put her through, despite the pain and exhaustion, she kept moving forward with the kind of determination that only came from absolute conviction in the rightness of her cause. They were 2 blocks from the library when Tommy's phone rang. He answered it quickly and his expression immediately became grim. We have a problem, he said after ending the call. That was my contact at SOCOM. Stevens has issued an APB for all 3 of us. We're wanted as suspected terrorists who stole classified material and killed federal agents. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Killed federal agents? We haven't killed anyone. Doesn't matter. Stevens is creating a narrative that justifies using lethal force against us. Every law enforcement officer in the state will be looking for us, and they'll be authorized to shoot on sight. Sarah leaned against a building, the weight of this new development clearly affecting her. He's cutting off all our options. Even if we try to surrender to local police, they'll either kill us or turn us over to Stevens. Marcus looked around at the empty streets, realizing how exposed they were. Every passing car could contain someone looking for them. Every security camera could be used to track their location. The library is still our best option, he decided. Public space, lots of witnesses, security cameras that work in our favor. If Stevens wants to take us there, he'll have to do it in front of a lot of people. They quickened their pace, but as they turned the corner toward the library, they saw something that made their hearts sink. Multiple black SUVs were positioned around the building, and men in tactical gear were setting up a perimeter. He anticipated us, Tommy said grimly. Stevens knows how we think. Marcus felt frustration building inside him. Every move they made, Stevens seemed to be one step ahead. The colonel was using his resources and training to systematically eliminate every option they had. There has to be somewhere else, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. They were running out of places to hide, and Stevens was tightening the net around them. Tommy was studying the tactical positions around the library when his phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and suddenly straightened up. Change of plans, he said with the first smile Marcus had seen from him all night. My contact just sent me coordinates. Admiral Martinez's people are already here, and they're not playing by Stevens' rules. What do you mean? Marcus asked. I mean, we're about to have some very serious backup. The kind that doesn't answer to corrupt colonels or Pentagon conspiracies? Sarah looked confused. Who could the Admiral possibly have contacted that Stevens can't reach or intimidate? Tommy's smile widened. Ever hear of Task Force Justice? They're a black budget unit that investigates corruption within the military and intelligence communities. They report directly to the Secretary of Defense and have authority to arrest anyone, regardless of rank. Marcus felt hope surge through him for the first time in hours. And they're here? According to this message, they've been tracking Stevens' operation for months. Our evidence just gave them what they needed to move. Stevens thinks he's hunting us, but he's about to find out that he's been the prey all along. In the distance, they could see new vehicles arriving near the library. But these weren't more of Stevens' tactical teams. These were federal agents with very different orders, and they were moving to surround the men who had been surrounding the library. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and Colonel David Stevens was about to learn that some corruption runs so deep that it eventually exposes itself to the very people whose job it is to clean it up. The final confrontation was minutes away, and for the first time since this all began, Marcus believed they might actually survive it. The next 10 minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed operation. Tommy led them to a position where they could observe the library area while staying hidden behind a concrete barrier. What they saw was a masterclass in how real federal agents operated versus the corrupt tactics Stevens had been using. Task Force Justice agents moved with quiet efficiency, surrounding Stevens' tactical teams without being detected. Unlike Stevens' heavy-handed approach, these agents worked to minimize civilian exposure and collateral damage. They identified themselves clearly, showed proper credentials, and gave Stevens' people multiple opportunities to surrender peacefully. Marcus watched through Tommy's binoculars as the confrontation began. Stevens himself was standing near one of the black SUVs, speaking urgently into his radio. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the confusion and growing panic on the colonel's face as he realized his operation was being dismantled by federal agents with higher authority than his own. Agent in charge is Commander Patricia Reynolds, Tommy said, reading updates on his phone. She's been investigating the corruption network for 8 months. Our evidence just gave her the final pieces she needed to make arrests. Sarah was leaning against the barrier, finally allowing herself to believe they might actually survive this ordeal. What happens now? Now Stevens and his people find out what it feels like to be on the wrong side of federal law enforcement, Marcus replied with satisfaction. They watched as Commander Reynolds approached Stevens directly. Even without audio, it was clear from Stevens' body language that he was not happy with this turn of events. He gestured angrily, pointed toward the library, and appeared to be demanding explanations. Reynolds remained calm and professional, but her stance made it clear she was not impressed by Stevens' protests. The confrontation escalated quickly when Stevens reached for his sidearm. Before he could clear his holster, 3 Task Force Justice agents had him on the ground in handcuffs. The remaining members of his tactical team, realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered, surrendered without resistance. Tommy's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. Rodriguez here. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a genuine smile. Commander Reynolds wants to meet with us. She's sending a secure transport to pick us up. Within minutes, an unmarked federal vehicle arrived at their location. The driver was a professional-looking woman in her 40s who introduced herself simply as Agent Martinez, Commander. Reynolds is very interested in meeting the people who helped expose this corruption network, she said as they got into the vehicle. She's particularly impressed with Lieutenant Mitchell's courage in gathering evidence despite the personal risk. As they drove toward the federal building, Marcus felt an enormous weight lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in days, they were in a vehicle with people who were actually trying to protect them, rather than hunt them down. At the federal building, they were escorted to a secure conference room where Commander Reynolds was waiting. She was a sharp-eyed woman with graying hair, and the kind of presence that commanded immediate respect. Behind her were several other agents and what appeared to be a senior Justice Department official. Lieutenant Mitchell, Commander Reynolds said, standing to shake Sarah's hand. I want to personally thank you for your courage in exposing this corruption. The evidence you gathered has allowed us to arrest not just Colonel Stevens, but 17 other individuals involved in this network. Sarah looked stunned. 17? Defense contractors, Pentagon officials, even 2 members of Congress who were taking bribes to approve weapon sales. Your documentation was so thorough that we were able to build cases against the entire network. The Justice Department official stepped forward. Ms. Mitchell, I'm Deputy Attorney General Harrison. I want you to know that all charges against you have been dropped. You're not AWOL. You're a whistleblower who risked her life to expose threats to national security. Marcus felt pride swell in his chest as he watched Sarah process this information. After months of being hunted and abused, she was finally receiving the recognition she deserved. What about Marcus and Tommy? Sarah asked. They risked everything to help me. Commander Reynolds smiled. Mr. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez will be receiving commendations for their assistance in this operation. They'll also be eligible for substantial rewards from the federal whistleblower program. Tommy laughed. I didn't do it for money, but I won't turn it down. Over the next several hours, they provided detailed statements about everything that had happened. Sarah's injuries were treated by federal medical personnel, and arrangements were made for her to receive proper care and protection during the legal proceedings that would follow. As the sun rose over Denver, Marcus found himself sitting with Sarah in a secure waiting area while final paperwork was completed. She looked exhausted but peaceful for the first time since he had met her. What will you do now? He asked. The Navy wants me back on active duty, with a promotion and assignment to naval intelligence, she said. Admiral Martinez personally requested that I join her staff. Apparently, they need people who aren't afraid to ask difficult questions and challenge corrupt authority. Marcus nodded approvingly. That sounds perfect for you. What about you? Are you going back to Colorado? Marcus considered the question. His quiet life as a small-town paramedic seemed very far away now. This experience had reminded him of the satisfaction that came from fighting for something important, from using his skills to make a real difference. Actually, Commander Reynolds offered me a position with Task Force Justice. Apparently, they can use someone with my medical training and military background to help other whistleblowers who find themselves in dangerous situations. Sarah's face lit up with genuine happiness. Marcus, that's wonderful. You'd be perfect for that work. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the visitors' gallery of a federal courthouse, watching as Colonel David Stevens was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for corruption, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Stevens' entire network had been dismantled, with sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years for various participants. Sarah, now Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, was sitting in the front row of the gallery. She had testified at every trial, her evidence providing the foundation for conviction after conviction. The broken woman Marcus had met at a gas station had become a powerful advocate for military integrity and whistleblower protection. After the sentencing, they met outside the courthouse. Sarah was in her dress uniform, looking every inch the decorated naval officer she had always been. Marcus was wearing a suit, having just finished testifying in another corruption case as part of his new role with Task Force Justice. How does it feel? Marcus asked as they walked down the courthouse steps. Like justice, Sarah replied simply. Stevens can't hurt anyone else, and maybe the next person who discovers corruption won't have to go through what I went through. Marcus thought about that night at the gas station when he had first heard Sarah's quiet whimper of pain. If he had just minded his own business and driven away, Stevens would still be operating his corruption network. Other soldiers would have continued to suffer and die to protect his illegal activities. You know what I learned from all this? Marcus said as they reached the street. What's that? Sometimes the quietest cries for help are the most important ones to hear. If I had ignored your pain that night, everything would have been different. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. Marcus, you saved my life. But more than that, you gave me back my faith that there are still good people willing to fight for what's right. They shook hands formally. 2 professionals who had found their calling in protecting others and fighting corruption. But Marcus could see in Sarah's eyes the same quiet strength that had first drawn his attention, no longer hidden by fear and pain. As they parted ways, Marcus reflected on how much both their lives had changed. Sarah had gone from being a victim of corruption to being one of the Navy's most respected intelligence officers. Marcus had gone from a quiet paramedic to someone who helped protect the people brave enough to expose wrongdoing. The woman who had been hurt but quiet had found her voice and used it to bring down an entire network of corruption. The SEAL medic who had thought his fighting days were over had discovered that the most important battles weren't always fought with weapons, but with courage, integrity, and an unwillingness to ignore suffering when you had the power to stop it. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations and explosive action. This one ended with something more powerful. Justice served, corruption exposed, and two people who had found their true purpose in protecting others who couldn't protect themselves. In a world where it's easy to look the other way and avoid getting involved, Marcus and Sarah had proven that sometimes the most ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they refuse to let injustice continue unchallenged. The quiet woman at the gas station had changed everything, not through violence or revenge, but through courage, determination, and the help of people who believed that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost.